Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say. I'll go ahead and say them anyway. Forget your balls and grow a pair of tits. It's hard, it's hard, it's hard out here for a bitch. It's hard.
To see women leadership in reality and on the screen and television is huge for women, huge.
Forget your balls and grow a pair of tits. It's hard, it's hard, it's hard out here for a bitch. It's hard for a bitch, for a bitch. It's hard out here for a bitch. It's hard for a bitch, for a bitch. It's hard.
That means that 97% of everything you know about yourself and about your country and your world comes from the male perspective.
I know you probably thought about this very much, Kirsten.
Oh, yeah.
There's got to be some downside to having a woman president, right? Something that may not fit with that office, correct?
I'm gonna say no, Bill.
Anyway, forget your balls and grow a pair of tits. It's hard, it's hard, it's hard out here for a bitch. It's hard.
Women are not making it to the top of any profession anywhere in the world. The numbers tell the story quite clearly. 190 heads of state, 9 are women. Of all the people in parliament in the world, 13% are women. In the corporate sector, women at the top, C-level jobs, board seats, tops out at 15-16%. The numbers have not moved since 2002 and are going in the wrong direction.
I think we're on a path to do great things around girls and women, but we're not there yet. I see it every day with girls. When girls stop raising their hand in 4th grade because they're getting cues from people in their classroom that they shouldn't be raising their hand to answer a math question, these girls are craving an opportunity to see women in the roles that they aspire to. And we found that 74% of high school girls love STEM. They actually enjoy it. But then we asked them to rank their potential career goals, and STEM careers were at the bottom. And then we asked, so why? And I said, because we don't see the females in those positions, so we don't know what it's like. When we ask them, what is it like to be a scientist, they have an image of an older man in his 60s in a white lab coat. That's not fun to them. That's not exciting.
We're creating new leaders, and they're going to not look like how they always did, an older white male. They're going to look like a woman, and they're going to look like people of color, and that is the true reflection of this country and of this world.
My name's Kate. I started On Your Awesomeness last year in 2016 as a way to pull Philadelphia girls together to make them feel better about themselves and to see what they can offer to the world. I used to be a high school science teacher, so I really like high school kids. They're really cool, and they are just starting to grapple with what it means to be an individual in the world and to understand our social norms and our cultural norms. They're starting to recognize what they've adopted from their families and what they actually want to take on as their own. And they're really trying to figure out what they can offer and what their strengths are. And high school girls in particular, I think, have that challenge where they're trying to figure out what is it about them that's really awesome, and how can they stand in that and be and shine and just rock on. And so when I was teaching high schoolers, I found that I would divert some class time sometimes away from physics, which is amazing. But we would talk about current events, or we would talk about race and sexism and issues surrounding class and socioeconomics. And for the most part, kids don't know what's going on. Their understanding of current events is really limited. And so these conversations were ways for them to start seeing what the headlines really meant and what was going on underneath them. And I found that those were the most rewarding interactions that I had with these teenagers, where they were trying to understand what was happening in the world and understand what that meant for them. And I also had really cool interactions with kids where they would be like, I need to write a check and I don't know how to do that. And I would say, okay, I will teach you how to write a check. Or I had some girls come and be like, we just bought a bookshelf from Target and we don't know how to put it together. We've never used a hammer. And I was like, okay, I have a hammer and we are gonna do this. This is what a finishing nail is. Like, it's just the cardboard and the wood. But so I wanted to develop a program that was gonna pull together both those skills, like how do you exist in the world and do things and take care of yourself, and the broader understanding of what it means to be an individual and what it particularly means to be a woman today, and to find the strengths in that. I grew up in Philadelphia, grew up in East Falls, and went to Germantown Friends School. And so it's really cool to be back in the city, and for me, even as an adult, to be like finding new places in the city and learning more about it, and recognizing the depth and range of people that we have in the city, that sometimes we're in our little enclaves. So part of the program also is to get different groups of people together, different girls, and to have them learn from each other and from their experiences. Teaching is amazing because you're working with kids as they develop new strengths and understand new things and hopefully apply it. And I wanted to actually like step away from textbooks and the classroom piece and really get into the nitty-gritty of what it means to be able to contribute and understand what you have to offer. So I didn't feel like the school setting was the place to do that, and I really, on some level, wanted to create something that was mine. So there are lots of organizations that do amazing things, and I maybe in a poor decision, but I deliberately did not research them. I was like, no, they're great and they're amazing and they're going to do their stuff, and I feel really strongly about creating this kind of hybrid program where we're talking about issues around culture and sexism and also learning new skills. Like, that's what I want to do. Whether it exists or not, like, I'm gonna do it. So part of creating this nonprofit was really, and still is, like my learning. And what are the legal responsibilities? And who do you even apply to? Like, all of those pieces. So it was really cool to teach myself, to figure out what my resources were, to do a lot of online research, and also really cool to create from the ground up. Like, I created our website and I figured out, all the little pieces that go there. I created all of the kind of accounting pieces that go with it. We're like federally recognized as a nonprofit, which is always the first question that people have when I go ask for funding. They're like, are you real? And I'm like, yes, we're real, because I did it, because I figured it out. And so what's really cool about this organization in particular is that every few days I remember what it's called, and it's called Own Your Awesomeness. And I have to like take a deep breath and be like, all right, I got to do that for myself. And it's not, a light switch. It's not like I started this nonprofit and so therefore I am like 100%. Every day it's a cool reminder, and I get to look back and see what I did, which helps me move forward and think that I can do even more things. Own Your Awesomeness is this hybrid with skills and kind of self-understanding and self-reflection. And so we have a model where it's basically a day camp. So it's 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday in Center City, which was important for me when I was planning this, because I wanted to make sure that every girl could get there on her own. And I know when I was growing up, I like figured out how to take the train, and I was like, I'm amazing. I'm like magical. I can get where I want to go. I didn't figure out the bus system in high school, which somehow was more complicated than the train. But there's so much agency. You have so much, you decide where you go if you know how to take public transit. So I really wanted to make sure that every girl could get there on her own, which was cool. And last year we did have a girl who had never taken the train before. And so by Wednesday and Thursday, she was like, yes, I'm a train master. Very cool. But so we have this day camp model for high school girls where they come into the city and we have a crazy number of activities that we do throughout the week that are kind of spaced out. So every day has some discussion time where we're talking about a particular topic. So for example, we could talk about body image, we could talk about self-love and like how you talk to yourself. We could talk about mental health, we could talk about sexual health, the whole gamut, right? We also have the skill building pieces, so how to use power tools, how to change a tire and look under the hood, like what are all those things in your car. We did a bike workshop, so understanding like, the anatomy of a bike and some basic bike safety. All the girls rotate and help cook lunch during the week, so there's a little like cooking and how to cut a tomato without cutting your finger. And then we try to make sure that there's at least something physically active every day. So my favorite last year is we played football. And I am so excited to do that again this year because most girls don't know the rules of football. And we could play anything, but it's actually really cool to pick a game that most people don't know how to play. So nobody has an inherent advantage. Nobody grew up really playing football. And it's also really cool to dig into football because it's so hyper masculine culturally and kind of dominated, not just in terms of who plays, but in terms of who talks about it, by men. And so if you're interested in sports and you don't understand football, you're still not in the conversation. So we do like 2 minutes, like the bare bones, what are the rules of football? And then we're just running around in this park and playing, and it's amazing. And we did yoga, we did a dance workshop, which was also really cool because these girls are trying to figure out what their bodies are in general, but then like how to embrace being uncomfortable with these pretty off the beaten path dance instructions. So that was really cool. And then we went to City Hall and met with Councilwoman Helen Gim. So, a pretty short walk, but really nice to get out, go to a new place, talk to a woman who's doing really cool work for the city and does not come from a line of bureaucracy. She used to work in education and decided this was the way that she wanted to leave her mark. So she's really cool to talk to. And we did a scavenger hunt. So every day has like a little bit of all three of those pieces of a conversation that digs into what it's like to talk about culture and issues that affect women, something skill building where you're learning a new piece, and then something that's active, whether it's a scavenger hunt or football or some other things. So Own Your Awesomeness is for high school girls in or around Philadelphia. Since it's a summer program, that's girls that will be going into high school, so going into 9th grade or up to 12th grade, which is a really cool age group because even 9th to 12th grade, it's a huge difference in what those girls are dealing with, but they also recognize that where they were, where they're going to be, so you can build a really cool community. But it's for girls for all over the city. So I'm reaching out to public schools and charter schools and private schools. We're trying to get all different experiences there. Girls from the suburbs are more than welcome to come in. And obviously girls from the city are encouraged also. So it's a really interesting crew, and last year we had a phenomenal range of kids. We had 13 girls participate last year. We had Black girls, white girls, Indian girls, Asian girls. It was awesome. We had about 50% of our registration fees were covered with financial aid. So some girls were full pay kids, some kids were partial aid, some kids were full aid. And they came, we had 3 or 4 girls from the suburbs, but most of the girls were from the city. So it was a really interesting, different group of kids that we were able to bring together. And the goal is to do that again for this summer. So to have 16 girls every week that represent different parts of the city, different experiences, and to have them be able to learn from each other in that space. When I was starting, I reached out to everyone and was like, I want to do this really cool camp. Like, let me know if you have ideas. And everyone was like, I have ideas. And then I was like, oh no, this is too many ideas. So it really took a lot for me to figure out what felt right. There were programs that I wanted to include that I just couldn't logistically or we didn't have time for. But I kind of come back to that idea that is it teaching a skill that either has immediate repercussions where you're like, now I know how to write a check, or where you feel like now you can learn more about that thing, right? Nobody leaves this saying, I know everything about cars, but you leave saying, I know a little about cars, and so now I can learn more, or I can feel more confident when I'm going to the mechanic, or I can feel more confident just when I'm driving, that like I'm in charge of this thing and I know some stuff about it. So thinking about that from a skill perspective, does it really offer you either like tangible skills or some sort of confidence in that setting next time? And then thinking about conversations in that same way. Does it spark something where you're like learning new things about yourself or learning new things about how you exist in the world? Or is it giving you resources or some combination of the two? So I had a lot of people be like, oh, what about this? I could teach a workshop on this. And I was like, that sounds so cool. And it sounds like a next tier, right? It doesn't sound as rewarding as a different hour spent on something else. So that was really hard for me to figure out, but it just took a lot of like deep breaths and reflecting and figuring out what would be the biggest impact, and also what's new, what do girls not see that often. So I wanted to make sure that there was like some art and some poetry and some creative time during the week, but like that's also pretty accessible. So that's not an art week, because art isn't that hard to step into. But talking about sexual health and like what's going on with your body, that's hard. Like, let's do that, right? And looking at cars, like that's hard because it feels like it's not your domain. So let's do that. So when I was thinking about what we're including, those were the pieces, is what has the most results or the biggest potential to affect somebody's outlook. As Own Your Awesomeness grows, last year was our first year with 2016, and we had 1 week and it was amazing. 2017, we're expanding to 3 weeks. And so even that jump is like significant for me as the lone staff member, trying to coordinate who our guest speakers are, who our like week-long volunteers are, how we're going to get that many girls. So even that expansion feels like, okay, that's big. And then we're also looking to expand and try to figure out what we're doing during the school year, both in terms of programming and then in terms of just staying relevant and keeping our message out there. We are thinking about doing financial literacy workshops and sex ed workshops and similar workshops that you would find at our summer program, but doing it more in depth. So in a few weeks, I'll do a financial literacy workshop at a local high school, and it's a 3-hour, like, come, learn, leave, like, mind blown. And that is different from what we're offering, which is a 45-minute or an hour-long workshop on financial literacy during the summer. So I'm excited to be able to develop those programs and really be able to have 2 different styles of relaying a similar message. One where it's exposure and you're excited and you know a little bit more, and another one where you've really gained an expertise and a confidence with a particular topic. So that's our short-term goals, is to certainly figure out how we want to continue to grow the summer program and where that threshold is in terms of what one person can handle, but then to figure out the school year programs and how we want to be able to offer really great experiences there. Young women in the U.S. deal with a whole host of issues. It's really exciting that there's more women entrepreneurs than there have been. It's really exciting that there's more women in college than there have been, more women playing sports, more women in leadership positions, but it's still, those numbers aren't quite as good as they could be across the board. And I think there's so many reasons and layers to that, but a lot of it comes from both an internal and an external validation of what somebody has to bring to the room and to the world. And so I saw this when I was teaching in classrooms, that girls would apologize all the time, that they would raise their hand and say, like, I have a question, I don't know if it's stupid. And that was like just not, from a ratio perspective, not mimicked by the boys in that class. Girls were really self-conscious if they were really smart, because it meant that was not cool, it wasn't sexy. Girls were really self-conscious about being aggressive and strong. So you have female athletes that are like, oh, but how do I not build muscle? Just from like the high school experience of how do you negotiate with your peers about what you bring to the table and whether or not your strengths are really strengths, or if they're seen as something that people would rather not deal with, is really hard. And I think that that's embedded in our kind of cultural values, that women are meant to be in relationships with men, and that men are meant to go do cool things, but women are meant to be in relationships with men. And so when it comes back to, am I too smart or am I too strong, those are all relative to whether or not a girl is desirable in a relationship, right? If you're just in a room full of girls and you're really smart, amazing. That's so cool. And you're really strong, like, so cool. But once it becomes a dynamic where you're trying to figure out if someone else finds you attractive, and if that someone usually is a man, then the other pieces actually become liabilities, and that's really, really hard. So I think that that's like a lot of the high school girl experience. And then you zoom out, and the macro level is you see like women in bikinis on all the posters and eating the hot dogs in their super sexy way, and you're like, okay, so that's what, right? Like, I don't really want to do that. Am I supposed to do that? Like, so the whole line comes back again to like, what is sexy, and sexy is the goal, and why is that the goal? And with the current crazy climate around like the internet and texting and naked pictures, like, girls are just in a lot of ways in a lose-lose situation where they either offer their body in a way that they don't want to and it's used against them, or they offer it in a way they do want to and people are like, you shouldn't do that. And the conversation about enjoying your body and like having a gratifying and satisfying and fun sexual experience, the like fun part is not in the conversation, which blows my mind. Because that's the whole point, unless you're trying to have babies. Like, the whole point is to enjoy what's going on. And we skip that conversation. And so it becomes more of this like social contract about this is good for both of us because people will think this. So the heteronormativity is, you know, compounding, where we're thinking about girls in relationship to boys, but really that's like the air that we breathe. So I would imagine that it's like that much harder for a girl that doesn't identify as straight or a person that doesn't identify, you know, with the gender to figure out what they offer to the world if the only messages they're getting that everyone's getting is a girl offers a relationship to the world. Like, that's it. So as we do our programming, Own Your Awesomeness is trying to allow girls to see that their strengths are really positive, whatever those are, right? Because you're in a really cool group of kids that are excited to be there, excited to connect with these women that are volunteering their time that are also really cool and have some cool stories. And so when you share like, hey, I'm an artist, people are like, that's amazing. And like, let me see your drawings. They're so cool. We had a girl last year who just kept drawing and she was like, but I'm not supposed to do this. And we were like, no, it's awesome, right? Like, you get to unleash what you have to bring to the world. So obviously part of the goal is to like own the awesomeness that is already there in terms of your skills and your talents and your strengths. Another piece is to unlock some of the stuff that we've been trying to trample on, right? Like, it's great to be smart, it's great to be strong, it's great to be creative, it's great to be bold and to say like, yes, do those are wonderful. If that's part of how you identify and how you like really want to be, then be that, like, go for it. And then I think that third piece is the skill building, because when you feel like you can do more, then you do more, right? Or if you feel like you know more or you have more skills or you can develop more, then you get to do that, which is really cool. And I know for myself, when I think about situations, whether that's a meeting room or it's, again, going to my mechanic or whatever, if I don't feel like I know a baseline, then I'm like, I don't deserve to be here, right? I shouldn't talk, I shouldn't ask questions, I'm just a bother, all of those pieces. And I don't want to lean in and engage with my just really inherent right to be in the room. And instead I apologize for my presence, which is the opposite. So the goal with doing the skill building in particular is to give girls this foundation so they can approach any problem or any group or any meeting and say that they deserve to be there. That's where they start. And then they get to grow from there and contribute and recognize that this skill allows them to grow more skills, or this skill allows them to have a really cool conversation and feel like they are developing something awesome. And so when you think about the programmatic goals for Own Your Awesomeness, we're having those conversations where girls better understand themselves. And then we're also developing new things so that they feel like they can contribute even more. And it does come back to that name of Own Your Awesomeness, which is such a cool idea but that you are awesome already, and you can be more awesome. We'll get there, really cool, but you can stand up really tall and you can say that you're the bomb. I'm like, let's just be in that. I think when we started last year, I obviously had really high hopes. I was like, this is gonna be great. I had to like remember that they were humans I was interacting with and not dreams. So, there were some challenges and some expectations that I had to shift. But I definitely, one of my favorite moments was when, and just from a personal project standpoint, was when a girl asked if she could come back next year. And I was like, sweet, this is great. Like, it's not just great for me. Like, I had a great time this week and like we did cool stuff and I loved the conversations. But obviously the goal isn't about me doing this camp. It's about offering for other people. And this girl was like, can I come back next year? This is amazing. I love this space. And so that was really validating for me. It was also really cool to talk with the other women that worked that week. And they were like, this is new for me. This is new for me to be in a room full of women that are intentionally supporting other women. And I'm learning stuff about myself. I'm learning stuff from these other women because this space is so rare and it's so intentional. It was very cool on all fronts. Obviously, I had a great time and the girls got a lot out of it. And I find on some level the most striking piece was the other adult women got a lot out of it, being in that community and seeing like even ways that they could continue to grow, which was really cool. I think it's hard to give advice to teenagers today in general, but because I can just only think about my experience, and I would imagine that a lot of that is still true. So when I was in high school and middle school and in college, I grappled a lot with what it meant to be feminine because it felt like being feminine was the most important thing. And that felt really hard when I like admitted that to myself, that it's not necessarily that was what I chose to be most important, but it felt like it was chosen for me. And as an athlete and as a smart kid, I was like, all right, here we go to juggle, and trying to reconcile what that meant in terms of my body and how I shared it with people and what I tried to claim. So I went through phases of wearing like really skimpy things and really tight things, and then I wore stuff that you couldn't see any shape. Some days I felt safe, and some days I felt like I was trying to be invisible and that there's no growth there. So there was definitely that piece, and I think that for most girls, there's a reckoning there on what does it mean to be feminine in general, and what does it mean for you, and when do you feel good in it? So kind of like coming to peace with whatever your feminine looks like, and that's great. I think I also had an experience, so I currently have short hair as of like 2 weeks ago, but I cut all my hair off a few years ago as a conscious experiment to not be vain, because I had long hair and I was preoccupied with doing something with my hair every day, right? Trying to figure it out. And I was really excited. I buzzed it. I was like, get it away from me. Because then I didn't have I couldn't make it more beautiful. And while I certainly lost the appearance of femininity in that way, and that like, I was like, oh shoot. What I gained was this like relief that I didn't have to try anymore to be something. And I got like 30 minutes a day back. It made like dating really interesting, because if they weren't going to be interested in me with my buzzed head, then cool. Then that's the line. And so I think that almost comes back to, figuring out what rings true to you, and then staying with that somebody else doesn't get to say, well, this would make you cooler, so you should do that, because then I would like you more. But instead figuring out what makes you like you, and then owning that part. I think the first step when combating sexism or misogyny is to be able to see it. Even with the girls that we were talking to, we would make these lists of like, what do you see? Like, what are the kinds of movies that are out there? Or what is a woman supposed to look like? Or this and that. And you can usually list a few if you haven't been like really consciously looking at it, and then you kind of run out. But when you have this massive list and you see how, like, what an onslaught it is all the time, that the messages around what a woman is supposed to be and what her role is and what her boundaries are, then it like breaks you a little bit, and then you can start to move forward. And I think it's critically important for women to understand where we are and what we're absorbing, and just as critically important for men to understand the atmosphere that we are all living in. And so I think the first step is to see it, which can be really painful. For women, it's really painful, and I think for men, it brings up a lot of weird stuff around, is it my fault? And then you get defensive, and then, it's never just an individual, but it's important to recognize the systems that we're in. And I think the second piece then is choosing how you want to move forward. So for me, I'm not I went to the Women's March and that was amazing, but I'm not like a huge political activist. I'm not out there trying to change the laws, and I'm so excited for the people that are doing that. It's just not me. But I will have conversations with people, and I'll mention things that I see, right? And I will consciously try to watch movies and read books by women or about women, about real women that are dealing with stuff that is not a relationship that defines them. And that when I hear other people talking about stuff that feels like not on point, then I call that out. And that feels really important to me. Not in a way that's like, you're a bad person, but in a way that's like, I don't know if you saw it from this perspective, but it's like pretty important actually that like we talk about rape on college campuses. It's pretty important. And then it's not just like, oh man, we were having such a good time. And then like, somebody knocked on the door and tried to see if she was vomiting. No. You're not having a good time because that involves two people. Having a good time being awake and saying like, yes, I want this, rather than like, no. So I think recognizing the moments in your interpersonal, like day-to-day, about when you can have conversations that stretch people and stretch yourself, right? Remembering to be open and that you don't see everything is really important, because the like PSAs that we get maybe about like, don't rape people, like that doesn't go as deep as having a conversation with a friend of yours where that person already knows you and believes in you and trusts you, and then you say something that's challenging. That has a really big impact in terms of how we can grow as individuals in this community.